in the remote mountains of British Columbia, where the rushing waters of the Bridge River carved their way through ancient granite peaks. A moment was captured in 1941 that would decades later spark one of the internet's most enduring mysteries, the photograph taken during the reopening ceremony of the South Fork Bridge. In the tiny mining community of Goldbridge appeared unremarkable at first glance. A crowd of Depression-era locals gathered to witness the completion of a vital piece of infrastructure that would connect their isolated settlement to the outside world. However, buried within that sea of period-appropriate faces, hats, and clothing, stood a figure who would eventually become known across the digital world as the time-traveling hipster, a man whose appearance seemed to defy the very fabric of historical chronology and challenge everything we thought we knew about fashion, technology, and the visual culture of the 1940s. The story of this enigmatic photograph begins with Goldbridge itself, a community that epitomized the boom and bust cycle of British Columbia's resource extraction economy, founded during the gold rush fever that swept through the region in the early 20th century. Goldbridge had grown from a collection of prospector tents into a legitimate mining town, complete with infrastructure projects like the South Fork Bridge that were essential for moving equipment, supplies, and people through the rugged terrain. The bridge reopening ceremony represented more than just the completion of a construction project. It symbolized hope and progress for a community that had weathered the economic hardships of the Great Depression and was beginning to see signs of recovery as the world prepared for the industrial demands that would accompany the Second World War. The photograph that would eventually become internet famous was likely taken by a local photographer or perhaps a government official documenting the completion of this important infrastructure project. In 1941, photography was still a relatively formal affair, with most cameras requiring careful setup, precise timing, and considerable technical knowledge to operate effectively. The crowd gathered for the ceremony would have been dressed in their finest clothes. Men wearing suits, ties, and formal hats. Women in conservative dresses and carefully styled hair, all conforming to the social expectations and fashion norms of the era. It was against this backdrop of conventional 1940s attire that the mysterious figure would stand out so dramatically when the photograph was eventually rediscovered and shared on the internet nearly 7 decades later. The man who would become known as the time-traveling hipster appeared to be wearing what looked distinctly like modern clothing, wraparound sunglasses that resembled contemporary designer eyewear, what appeared to be a printed t-shirt with a logo or graphic design, and a casual, relaxed posture that seemed completely at odds with the formal bearing of everyone else in the photograph. His hair appeared to be styled in a way that seemed more consistent with modern fashion trends than the carefully pomaded and parted styles typical of the 1940s, and he was holding what looked like a small, portable camera that seemed far too advanced for the technology of the era. When the photograph began circulating on social media platforms and internet forums in the early 2000s, viewers were immediately struck by this figure's anachronistic appearance, and speculation began to run wild about his true identity and origins. The internet's fascination with apparent historical anomalies was not entirely new, and the time-traveling hipster joined a long tradition of mysterious figures and objects that seemed to appear out of place in historical photographs and artwork. Similar phenomena had been documented in various forms throughout history, from Renaissance paintings that appeared to show figures holding modern technology, to Victorian-era photographs that seemed to capture people wearing inexplicably contemporary clothing. One famous example involved a 1928 Charlie Chaplin film premiere that appeared to show a woman talking on what looked like a mobile phone, though later analysis suggested she was likely using a primitive hearing aid. These cases demonstrated humanity's enduring fascination with the possibility of time travel and our tendency to project modern interpretations onto historical images that might have perfectly reasonable explanations within their original context. As the photograph gained viral status across various internet platforms, amateur detectives and professional historians began conducting detailed analysis of every element visible in the image. The investigation process revealed fascinating details about both 1940s fashion and technology that challenged many of the initial assumptions about the mysterious figure's anachronistic appearance. The sunglasses that had seemed so modern and out of place were actually identified as a style that had been available since the 1920s, and protective eyewear for outdoor workers and sports enthusiasts had begun to gain popularity. Companies like Ray-Ban had been producing wraparound-style protective glasses for military aviators since the 1930s, and similar civilian models were readily available to consumers who could afford them, particularly in regions where outdoor work or bright sunlight made such protection practical and desirable. The apparent t-shirt that had seemed like such obvious evidence of time travel proved to be perhaps the most interesting element of the entire mystery. Detailed examination of the photograph revealed that what initially appeared to be a modern graphic t-shirt was actually a wool pullover sweater, specifically one that bore the distinctive logo and colors of the Montreal Maroons, a professional hockey team that had been extremely popular. During the 1920s and 1930s, the Maroons, who played in the National Hockey League until 1938, had developed a devoted following across Canada, and their merchandise was widely available throughout the country, including in remote communities like Goldbridge, where hockey represented one of the few connections to broader Canadian cultural life during the long, isolated winters. The camera that the mysterious figure was holding, which had initially appeared to be impossibly advanced for 1941, was identified through careful analysis as a Kodak Kodachrome camera, a portable model that had been in production since 1938. These cameras represented the cutting edge of consumer photography technology at the time, featuring compact designs and relatively advanced features that made them popular among amateur photographers who wanted to document important events and family gatherings. The presence of such a camera at a bridge reopening ceremony in a remote mining community was not particularly unusual, as these events represented significant milestones in local history that residents would naturally want to preserve for posterity. The casual clothing style and relaxed posture that had seemed so out of place in the formal context of the 1940s actually reflected broader changes in fashion and social behavior that were beginning to emerge during this period, particularly in remote communities where formal dress codes were often relaxed due to practical considerations. The late 1930s and early 1940s had seen the beginning of a gradual shift toward more casual clothing, particularly among younger people and in rural areas where practicality often took precedence over formality. The figure's apparent comfort with being photographed in casual attire, while unusual, was not entirely unprecedented for the era, especially in a community like Goldbridge, where mining work and outdoor labor had created a more relaxed approach to dress codes and social expectations. The ultimate resolution of the time-traveling hipster mystery serves as a fascinating case, studying how modern perspectives can dramatically reshape our interpretation of historical evidence, and how the power of the internet to amplify unusual images can create compelling narratives that may not necessarily reflect historical reality. The photograph remains a captivating example of how clothing styles, technology, and social behavior from previous eras can appear foreign or anachronistic when viewed through the lens of contemporary expectations and assumptions. While the mysterious figure was almost certainly not a time traveler, his story demonstrates the enduring human fascination with the possibility of temporal displacement, and our tendency to find patterns and anomalies that confirm our most exciting theories about the nature of time, history, and human experience. The case also highlights how careful historical analysis and research can reveal the fascinating complexity of past eras that were often oversimplified or misunderstood in popular culture, reminding us that history is far more nuanced and surprising than we might initially assume. The mystery of the time-traveling hipster of Goldbridge ultimately teaches us more about ourselves and our modern assumptions than it does about any supernatural phenomena or temporal anomalies. In our eagerness to find the extraordinary in historical photographs, we sometimes overlook the rich complexity and surprising diversity of past eras, assuming that people from earlier decades lived in a world far more rigid and uniform than was actually the case. The careful detective work that eventually debunked the time travel theory revealed a fascinating glimpse into 1940s Canada, where hockey merchandise traveled to remote mining communities. Advanced cameras were available to amateur photographers, and protective sunglasses were practical necessities for outdoor workers. The real story proved to be far more interesting than the fantasy, a snapshot of how modern technology, popular culture, and changing fashion trends were already beginning to reshape even the most isolated corners of the Canadian wilderness. This captivating tale of mistaken identity and historical detective work reminds us that sometimes the most compelling mysteries have perfectly reasonable explanations, and that the truth can be just as fascinating as the fiction we create around it. The Goldbridge photograph stands as a testament to the power of the internet to transform ordinary historical images into viral sensations, while also demonstrating the importance of careful research and critical thinking in separating fact from fantasy. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery with us and learning about the surprising realities of 1940s Canadian life, make sure to hit that like button and let us know in the comments. what other historical mysteries and viral phenomena you would like us to investigate next. Do not forget to subscribe to West is Best for more incredible deep dives into the fascinating stories, myths, and legends that have shaped Canadian culture and captured our collective imagination. And remember to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest explorations into the unexpected corners of our nation's history. Because when it comes to separating Canadian fact from fiction, West is best.